You picked up those dumbbells because somebody told you it would keep you strong. You've been showing up, sweating, counting your reps like a good soldier, and somehow you feel weaker than you did 2 years ago. Here's the truth. Almost nobody says out loud. After 60, the lifting itself is only half the job. The other half is a switch inside your muscle that stops flipping on its own, and if you never flip it, you can train every single day and still shrink. This got quietly buried, because the people selling memberships and powders make more money when you blame yourself instead of the switch. Stay with me, because there's a 1943 government food chart that spelled this out in plain language, back when grandmothers knew it by heart. You don't need a gym. You don't need a single supplement. You need what is already sitting in your kitchen right now. I want to tell you about the moment this hit me. I was 61, standing in my garage, staring at a set of adjustable dumbbells I'd paid $140 for. I'd used them faithfully for 8 months, and that morning I tried to carry 2 bags of mulch from the driveway, the same 2 bags I used to carry without thinking, and I had to stop and set them down halfway. 8 months of lifting, and I couldn't carry mulch. That was the day I stopped trusting the simple story and started digging, because here is what I found, and it made me angry that I'd never heard it before. Your muscle is not a bank account where every deposit just adds up. Your muscle is a factory, and that factory only runs when a specific alarm bell rings inside it. When you're 25, that bell rings loud at the smallest signal. A bit of exercise, a normal meal, and the factory roars to life, building new muscle for hours. But somewhere after 50, that bell goes quiet. Scientists have an ugly name for it. They call it anabolic resistance. It means the exact same workout, the exact same plate of food, no longer rings the bell the way it used to. The signal arrives, the factory just doesn't hear it. So you lift, and the message to build never gets delivered. You did the work. Your body threw it away. Now here is where it gets specific, because a vague idea helps nobody. Researchers at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston spent years on exactly this question. 2 names you should remember: Elena Volpe and Blake Rasmussen. In the early 2000s, they took older adults and younger adults and fed them the same protein, then measured what actually happened inside the muscle. The young people's factories fired right up, the older people's barely stirred. Same food, same amount, completely different result. And that was the proof that the problem was never how hard you were trying. The problem was that nobody told you the rules had changed under your feet. But they found something else. And this is the part that gives you your power back. The quiet bell can be forced to ring. You just have to hit it harder. There's a single ingredient inside protein that acts like a hammer on that alarm, and when you get enough of it in one sitting, the old muscle wakes up almost like young muscle again. It's called leucine. It's an amino acid, one of the building blocks that make up the protein you already eat. And the amount you need in one meal is the number that changes everything. For a younger person, a little leucine rings the bell. For you and me, after 60, the research points to a threshold, roughly 2.5 to nearly 3 grams of leucine in a single meal to force that factory on. Fall short of it, and the meal barely counts, no matter how healthy it looked on the plate. Hit it, and you flip the switch the lifting was supposed to flip. That's the whole secret in one sentence. It isn't about eating protein. It's about eating enough of the right protein at once to cross the line. Below the line, almost nothing. Above the line, everything. And this is where I have to tell you who benefited from you never hearing the word threshold. Think about how modern eating is arranged. A little skim milk in your coffee, a piece of toast, a cup of yogurt at 10, a small lunch, maybe some crackers and a bit of cheese, because a big lunch makes you sleepy. Every one of those is a tap on the bell too soft to wake anything. You spread your protein thin across the whole day like margarine, a little here, a little there, and you never once cross the line that actually matters. Meanwhile, the whole snack industry, the whole low-fat cracker aisle, the whole 100-calorie pack, was built to sell you constant little nibbles. Nibbles keep you buying. Nibbles never ring the bell. You were fed in a pattern designed for a cash register, not for your muscles. Now compare that to how people ate before all this. Pull out that 1943 chart I mentioned. The United States Department of Agriculture put out a guide during the war years called the Basic Seven. And if you look at how families actually ate under it, breakfast was not a soft tap. Breakfast was eggs, real eggs, 2 or 3 of them, sometimes with meat, sometimes with milk that still had its fat. That single breakfast, without anyone knowing the word leucine, sailed right past the threshold before 8 in the morning. They rang the bell at sunrise. They rang it again at a real midday dinner. They rang it at supper. 3 loud strikes a day, every day, for a whole life. No wonder your grandmother could wring out a dish towel at 80 like it was nothing. We didn't get smarter than them. We got sold a lighter breakfast and called it progress. So let's make this real for your kitchen, because I promised you no gym and no supplements, and I meant it. What actually crosses that leucine line using ordinary food? Eggs are one of the cleanest ways. 3 whole eggs get you close to the neighborhood you want, and if you add a glass of milk, they push you over. A palm-sized piece of chicken breast, a good serving, lands you right around the threshold on its own. A can of tuna, plain and cheap, does it. A cup of cottage cheese, the old-fashioned kind that sat in every icebox for 100 years, is one of the strongest bell ringers in the whole store, and it costs pennies compared to any powder in a plastic tub. A bowl of Greek yogurt, the thick kind, does it. Even a pot of lentils with a little dairy alongside can get you there, if you eat a real portion and not a polite spoonful. Notice what all of those have in common. They are the foods that were on every working family's table before the packaged aisle took over. The answer was never exotic. It was on the table the whole time, and we swapped it for a granola bar. But here is the next trap, and it's the one that fooled me the longest, so let me save you the months I wasted. You can eat a perfect, threshold-crossing breakfast and still lose muscle, because ringing the bell is only step 1. Step 2 is that the factory needs a reason to build, a demand, a signal that says this muscle is needed, don't scrap it. And that signal comes from the lifting, so the food and the training aren't 2 separate hobbies. They are 2 halves of one machine. Miss either half, and the whole thing stalls. That's why the man eating steak but never moving stays soft, and the man lifting daily but eating like a bird, like I was, stays weak. You need both halves to close in the same day. And that raises the question that kept me up at night. If I've been lifting and it wasn't working, was I even lifting the right way? Because it turns out that after 60, how you lift matters more than how heavy you lift. And almost everybody, me included, was doing the one thing that helps the least. Here is what I mean. When most of us picture strength training, we picture slow, grinding, heavy lifting. Lift the weight up slow, lower it down slow, grit your teeth, and that does build some muscle size. But the thing that actually keeps an older body independent, the thing that lets you catch yourself when you trip, stand up from a low chair, carry the mulch, that's not slow grinding strength. That's power. Power is strength with speed attached. And power is the very first thing we lose as we age. Faster than size, faster than raw strength. There was a study out of a group of researchers working on aging and function, and what they found flipped the standard advice on its head. Older adults who lifted a lighter weight but pushed it up quickly, explosively, with control, gained more real-world ability than those grinding through heavy, slow reps. The muscle that saves your life on the stairs is fast muscle, and slow, cautious, geriatric-style lifting is exactly the style we tell older people to use, which quietly trains away the very quality they need most. We taught a whole generation to lift in the way that protects the muscle least. So the fix costs you nothing and changes everything. You don't lift heavier, you lift with intent. The way up is quick and deliberate, a firm push, like you mean it. The way down is slow and controlled. 3 seconds, feeling the weight the whole way. Up fast, down slow. That single change turns the same dumbbell you already own into a power tool instead of a paperweight. Same weight, Same 8 months? Completely different body. If I had only known. Now I can already hear you. You're thinking this all sounds like a project. Special foods, threshold this, power that, a whole system to learn, and you've got a hip that aches, and a schedule, and no interest in turning your kitchen into a laboratory. So this next part is for you. Specifically, the person who figures this is too much fuss and only works for people with time and money. I'm going to give you the simplest version, the one you can start tomorrow morning with the food already in your fridge and no equipment you don't own. If you want to go deeper on exactly how to identify which foods in your kitchen already clear that line, and how to build a daily pattern around it without tracking a single number, I've put it all together in a book called Reset, and you can find the link in the description. It grew out of the same digging I've been doing, written for people who are done with vague advice and want the plain, practical version they can actually use tomorrow morning. Take a look when you're ready. It's all there waiting for you. Here it is. Anchor one meal a day and make it breakfast. Just breakfast. Don't try to fix every meal. Make breakfast the meal that crosses the line, and you've already beaten most people your age. 3 eggs. If you can, a glass of milk with it, or a piece of cheese, or a cup of that plain yogurt on the side. That's it. That one plate rings the bell before you've even read the paper. If eggs aren't your thing, a big bowl of cottage cheese does the same job cold. No cooking at all. You are not counting grams. You are just making sure the first meal of the day is a real meal with real protein, the way it used to be, instead of a slice of toast and a prayer. Then, sometime that same day, give the muscle its reason. You don't need weights for this either. Stand up from a sturdy chair and sit back down, slow on the way down, and do it until your legs are honestly tired. That's a squat, and it's the single most important movement for staying out of a nursing home, and your kitchen chair does it for free. Remember the rhythm. Stand up with purpose, quick and firm. Lower yourself down slow. Count to 3. 10 of those. Rest. 10 more if you've got them. Push against a wall like you're trying to move it. Carry something heavy across the room and back. That is strength training. It was always strength training. We just got convinced it had to happen inside a building with a monthly fee. Do those 2 things, the real breakfast and the chair, in the same day, and you have both halves of the machine turning. Food to ring the bell. Movement to give the muscle a reason to answer. That's the whole thing. Stripped down to what a busy person with an aching hip can actually keep doing. And keeping doing it is the only part that ever mattered. But I want to go back to something, because I skipped past it, and it's too important to leave buried. I told you older muscle needs more of the trigger than young muscle, and that leads to a fact that genuinely upset me when I understood it, because it's the exact opposite of what most people over 60 have been told. You have probably heard, maybe from a doctor, maybe from a magazine, that as you age you should eat less protein, go easy on the meat, protect the kidneys, lighten up, and for a person with existing kidney disease, careful. That's a real conversation with a real doctor. But for the healthy older person, that advice, taken as a blanket rule, has been aging people into frailty for decades, because the science says the opposite. The older you get, the more protein you need per meal to get the same result, not less, precisely because of that quiet bell. The government's own general guideline, the amount they say the average adult needs, was built largely on studies of young and middle-aged people. It's the floor to keep you from getting sick. It was never the amount to keep an older body strong. Newer work by researchers focused on aging has argued that older adults do better with noticeably more, closer to 1 gram of protein for every 2 pounds of body weight across the day, spread into meals that each cross the line. That's a meaningful jump above the old number. And a generation of people ate under the low number, wondered why they were fading, and were told it was just age. It wasn't just age. It was a rule meant for young bodies quietly applied to old ones. Think about what that cost. Think about the people who cut back on eggs because eggs got a bad name for a couple of decades. Think about the ones who switched to a tiny lunch and a light dinner because heavy meals felt indulgent. They were starving the factory and being praised for it. And the frailty that followed, the falls, the walkers, the losing the house because you can't manage the stairs anymore, a real share of that traces straight back to a plate that never once rang the bell. That's the leak. That's the quiet cost of the modern way, running under your feet this whole time, and almost nobody points at it. So who pushed the old way aside? Nobody in a mustache-twirling room, I don't think. It was quieter than that, and honestly more frustrating because there's no single villain to shout at. It was a food industry that discovered soft, cheap, shelf-stable carbohydrates were far more profitable than real protein, and marketed them as the wholesome modern breakfast. It was a supplement industry that took the word protein and locked it inside a $40 tub, so people came to believe you needed to buy special powder to get something a can of tuna gives you for $1. It was decades of diet advice that treated all older people like fragile patients instead of capable bodies that simply needed feeding right. Each piece made somebody money. Together they erased what your grandmother did without a single thought. And the lifting industry did its part too, selling the idea that the answer was always more weight, more machines, more membership, when the missing piece was never in the gym at all. It was on the plate you ate before you got there. Now let me hand you the finale, the thing I dug out that pulled it all together, the piece that turns this from an idea into something you can feel in a couple of weeks. Because there's one more lever, and it's the one the old-timers used without ever naming it. When I went back through the older nutrition writing, the home economics texts, and the wartime feeding guidance from the 1940s, I noticed something about timing that modern advice completely lost. It wasn't just that they ate protein. It was when they moved in relation to it. The old pattern was a real breakfast, and then work. Physical work. In the hours after that morning meal. Not a jog, not a program. Chores. Walking, carrying, using the body while the fuel from that threshold-crossing meal was still flowing through the blood. And here's why that turns out to matter so much, confirmed by that Galveston research and the work that followed it. When you make the muscle work, while the amino acids from a real meal are actually in your bloodstream, the two signals stack. The food rings the bell. The movement holds the line open. And the two together produce far more muscle building than either one does separated by hours. The old daily rhythm, eat big, then use your body, wasn't a quaint accident. It was, by pure practical wisdom, the single most effective way to fight anabolic resistance ever devised. And they were doing it every morning without a lab coat in sight. So here is your weekend, and it costs you nothing. Saturday morning, eat the real breakfast. 3 eggs, the milk, the yogurt, whatever crosses your line. Then, within the hour or two after, while that fuel is live, do your movement. The chair squats, a brisk walk with something in each hand. Carry the laundry up the stairs and back down and up again. Rake, dig, haul, push. It does not need to be long. It needs to happen while the meal is still working. Food first, then the body, in that order, close together. That's the stack. That's the thing the slow-lifting, protein-cutting, nibble-all-day modern advice managed to break into 2 useless halves. You just put them back together. Do that on the weekend when you've got time, and lean on the simple chair and breakfast version on the busy days. In 2 or 3 weeks, you'll reach for something you'd been avoiding. A bag of mulch, a full watering can, a grandchild off the floor, and it will come up easier than it has in years. Not because you found a new exercise. Because you finally started ringing the bell the lifting was always meant to ring, and you did it with food that was on your grandmother's table the whole time. I keep thinking about that morning in the garage, standing there beside $140 of dumbbells I couldn't get any return on, blaming my age, blaming my body, ready to give up. The problem was never me, and it was never you. We were doing the visible half and starving the invisible half, and no one told us the second half existed. That's what makes me want to grab every person our age by the shoulder. Somebody quietly rearranged how we eat and how we're told to train, and it cost us our strength, and it was never necessary. You are the kind of person who would rather know how the machine actually works than keep feeding coins into it. That's why you're still here. That's who this is for. The people who refused to accept getting weaker as a monthly subscription when the fix was free in the kitchen the whole time. So tell me something. Was your breakfast this morning a bell ringer, or was it a soft little tap that woke nothing up? Be honest, and put it in the comments. Tell me exactly what you ate, because I read them, and I want to see how many of us were fed the light version and called it healthy. And if you carried something today that felt heavier than it should have, say that too. If any part of this cracked something open for you, come with us. This is a growing pile of people digging up the plain, cheap, hands-on knowledge that used to be common and got buried because nobody profits from you knowing it. Subscribe and stand with them. Because the next thing I'm pulling apart is something almost everyone over 60 gets wrong about sleep. And there's an old farmhouse habit, gone now for about 70 years, that fixed it without a single pill. I found the record of it, and once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. I'll have it ready for you soon. Don't miss it. Before you go, one thing. This video showed you the switch. Inside the old ways society, I take it all the way the full plan, meal by meal from your own kitchen. And if something puzzles you, you ask me directly, and I answer you myself. No robots. You won't be alone either. Practical folks like you are already in there with us. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen, and you can cancel anytime.